Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Town of Wrentham Master Plan Steering Committee meeting on November 17th, 2022. Happy to see a good cohort of our Master Plan Steering Committee members with us, though we presently don't have our Town Planner, Rachel Benson, or our Chair, Steve Schwarm. So we will nonetheless press on and get rolling with this in respect of everyone's time. So we don't have too complicated an agenda this evening, but I think it is important for us to reconvene as a group and just get one final sort of round of updates and direction from the group before we do turn toward finalizing the master plan. And so I'll walk you through what we have before us this evening. First is a general discussion. We can get as specific as the committee would like, but a more general discussion to start with the community feedback that we received through our comment period, both through the public workshop, which was hosted, and then the follow-up community survey and comment period, which was open for 45 days after the forum. And then just a brief look at the implementation chapter, which was the final chapter to be drafted. That's been distributed to the committee now and would be a part of the final document as well. And then just some next steps from where we are to the sort of completion of this process, which is very close at this point. So we've got a good amount of the committee present. So I see Krista, Chris, John, Jerry, John, Murphy, and John Jackson, Beatrice, Ellen, Lauren, and Rebecca. So we're missing Everett this evening, who told me he would not be able to join us. I'm not sure about Steve or Jeff. They might be able to join us. Julie could not. I don't know if I heard from Debbie or George, but I assume George probably not as well. So that's our full committee. And thank you all for your service throughout this process. It has been excellent to have your representation and your commitment to the long-term planning for the town and thinking about what should happen over the next 10 years or so in guiding this effort. And it really has been fantastic to work with you all. So I really appreciate your time in this process. So let's dive right into our first item for the evening, which is discussion of the community feedback. So we presented the community forum was held virtually on September 19th. Many of you were there, so thank you for that. We also then that same week had presentations of the master plan and a sort of a general overview of its content, touching on the overall topic goals and the vision statement. We presented that to the Board of Selectmen on the 20th of September, the Planning Board on the 21st of September, and the Conservation Commission on the 22nd of September, and had a nice audience with each of those important boards. And then they sort of helped to promote that we were in a comment period through their various audiences. So thank you for them hosting us in those moments. And I think that was a good way to get the word out, promote the fact that we're advancing this process. The public comment period was then open from the 19th of September all the way through the end of October. On the end of Halloween, I officially closed the survey here back at the office on November 1st, that morning. So we're able to collect a lot of comments through the survey and then also through emails, which were received, and then compiled those with the comments we received in the workshop itself. So we've compiled all of the comments that were received one way or another. Overall, we received about 95 responses, and then in the survey, and had an additional 5 or so commenters that we received via email. So good collection of people who are really paying attention to the details of the plan and gave us some very thoughtful and productive comments. So what I was going to do now was just go, I guess, maybe a comment about the comments. And that's that what I've taken is compiled all of them in a document that I shared with the committee as well, so you could see all the feedback that has been received. And I've been going through that feedback, comment by comment. I've integrated the comments that I thought were very straightforward, not necessarily changing content deeply, or anything that was a typo or a clarification, or non-controversial or requiring further discussion, I've taken upon myself, have started those revisions based upon the comments. And we had a few commenters who went through the document in a very detailed manner and gave a lot of their time. So we're appreciative of those residents who did that, and had some very thoughtful ways to clean up and clarify, things as straightforward as capitalizing the word town when it's used. We had uncapitalized and capitalized versions, so we've gone through and done those type of changes in the updated document, which we're bringing forward. And what I have for you this evening is those comments going section by section, which don't fall into that category, so which might require some discussion by the committee. So I've got the next series of slides highlights those comments as bulleted points, and I think this evening would be very helpful for me if the board, or as the committee, sorry, not the board, you members of the committee could provide a little bit of direction or feedback as to how these comments should be integrated. And we don't have to get into a deep discussion with each one, but it would be nice to touch upon them and get that direction from the group. I think some of them are more straightforward than others, but just to get a sense of, go ahead and do that or not do that, or discuss if it needs further discussion. Sound good?
Yes.
All right. So first was starting the executive summary. And we had some questions about the impacts of climate change on Wrentham. I think a few questions throughout the document about climate change. In this case, I think the comment was more about clarifying specifically what those direct impacts to the town of Wrentham may be, rather than a general sort of climate change sentence, to make it more clear what the impacts to Wrentham would be. And I think that's a fair comment, and I think that type of change can be made. Another comment was about I guess, do you guys want to pause for each of those? Does that seem reasonable? I don't want to make this too laborious and long.
Josh, this is Jerry McGovern.
Yes.
I have a suggestion that might simplify this a little bit.
Okay.
You have 95 comments. I think that was on 19 pages of the document, was all the 19. There's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of very strong feelings, all of them very valuable input. One of the challenges in regards to incorporating the comments is that there are a lot of comments that are contradictory. One person might say we need to add sidewalks everywhere. Another person will say we should never have any sidewalks, that kind of stuff. And it might be simpler than, rather than trying to adjudicate each of those comments and figure out whether it's worthwhile or not, and how we should make a change to a document we've been working on now for 18 months. My suggestion would be that you've got all those comments broken down by the 8 different, what do you call them, categories or functional areas. I forget what the term is you use for those, but for each of those, at the end of each of those chapters, maybe we just put the comments that related to that thing, those at the end of that. Because that does 2 things. One is it makes us simpler. We're not cutting out anybody's comments because those of us on the call tonight might not agree with necessarily. But more importantly, as a document is used going forward and different departments pull out their sections, those comments are right there in that section that they can see. We wrote this up, but here were the feelings of the public that wanted to weigh in, and we should keep those things in consideration, even if we don't necessarily concur that they're consistent with other things.
I like that comment. Can I maybe suggest one amendment to it, Jerry?
Sure.
I might suggest that we include all, it's a good point to include all the comments as they were received. We don't need to determine with each one whether or not it's appropriate, but I think putting them all maybe in an appendix to the full document rather than section by section, we just put them all together as an appendix, and then people can see all of the comments that were received in the way that they're organized in that table that I sent to the committee. Does that seem okay?
I would only disagree with that, not hardly. I'm not hard on disagreeing with that, but I think that as we go forward, different departments in the towns are going to automatically go to the sections that are most appropriate to them and may not look at the other stuff. So some of them may get overlooked. if we did it that way. We could do it both ways, maybe even just to have it. So we do have a comprehensive, but so that when we know that the planning board or the conservation commission or the open space is looking at their stuff and they're looking at the chapter on open space or whatever, those comments are right front and center for that.
Mm-hmm. Other members have thoughts or opinions about that?
No,
Chris, yeah. Oh, sorry.
No,
Beatrice, why don't you go
yes.
ahead and then we'll do Chris.
No, I think Jerry has a good point. The documents, I mean, they're long. There's a lot of paper, a lot of reading. And if it's right there, maybe, you know, I think it's more effective. That's for the reader.
Okay. And Chris?
Yeah, well, I wasn't thinking this way before Jerry made the comment, but I think it's actually a very good comment. And
Yeah.
you know, a couple thoughts. You know, who am I to tell a resident, even though I might not agree with their opinion, that it's not valid enough to be present, especially if they took the time to make said comment.
Right.
I think it's important, and I think Jerry's right. I think it needs to be at the back of every section so that we understand the comment is relevant to the topic, subject matter, you know, that exactly follows.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question, Josh.
Yeah,
Would
Chris.
this be fairly simple to parse out, do you think? I mean, I don't know what the comments look like. I imagine if people commented, they may have commented a lot of different things. I guess just logistically, is that possible?
Yes, it's quite possible. So the survey, which was the vehicle for most comments received, was actually divided by the chapters. So it's already kind of organized that way.
And I would agree with what everybody else is saying. I think sometimes when there's an appendix, I don't think I've ever looked at an appendix.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say, so I'm perfectly fine with this. I think that's a good approach to reflect the comments that were received. With comments, typically the way we handle them is kind of because now we're, as Jerry pointed out, we're at the end of a long process, which has involved a lot of community conversation and input over the course of the process. And now we're receiving individual's comments in response to the sort of document which reflects the process as best we can make it reflect the process. Of course, it's not perfect. But we do try to weigh those comments against sort of that larger process and see if there's a comment which is productive and more or less consistent with what we think we've heard through the process, then we try to integrate that into the body of the document as well. If there's a comment which seems antithetical to the approach or feedback that we've heard throughout the process, I don't think at this point we wouldn't weigh that individual comment stronger than the feedback and we received through multiple vehicles throughout the process. So that's the sort of it's not exact science, of course, but that's the judgment we try to make with the comments that we're integrating. So would the board, I keep referring to you all as a board, you're getting an upgrade this evening, but would the committee like to just look through these to see if we can identify some that we think we should also, in addition to adding as an appendix to each section, include in the body of the section as well, if it's something that would clarify or expand the sort of meaning and detail of the document.
Would this take, it all depends. The meeting goes through 6:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, so will this take a lot of time? I mean, we'll be able to cover the rest of the agenda?
Yeah, I think we can probably flip through it relatively quickly.
Yeah.
It's bulleted points on a series of slides,
I
like
say
the one.
yes,
Okay.
but I'm just one out of many.
And I can help maybe with that summarizing and discerning a little bit, just to clue you all into some key bullets on each slide, just to see maybe the ones that deserve discussion. All right, sounds good. So on this one, I think clarifying climate change, of course, that's something that we can do. Another comment about sewer systems needed for real progress. I don't know that that may be true. I mean, it might be worth a comment, but it's not necessarily
It's needed for real progress.
not something that we've, you know, there's not a strong position in the master plan that like the town should be fully sewered or anything like that. So I don't know that we need to go too much on that comment. The question of detached accessory dwelling units, I think that's maybe a more detailed, you know, for further discussion by the town as you move toward continuing a discussion around accessory dwelling units and what's the most appropriate way. So we need to do that. A comment just like this is a good example of a comment that we would not necessarily integrate with the overall body of the document, which was a sentiment sort of to the town's well enough how it is, leave the town alone, that sort of idea, which showed up in a few comments, but we didn't hear that loud and clear throughout the process, and people do think there are productive ideas that have been documented. So I don't know that, for example, integrating this viewpoint is consistent with what we've heard.
Hey, Josh, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
So I'm actually gonna change my mind, if that's okay. And I apologize that I didn't look at these comments before the meeting. I 100% acknowledge that, and maybe I should have. But yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna have to take a different approach here and not include all these comments. Like, there's one specific to Cizacello Drive. I mean, we can't include that in a comment section. We also can't, I don't think we can include, I'm not saying we can't, but to your point, if people have been making comments the whole master plan and we're not including those at every section, why are we going to include just these? And secondly, I don't want to, I think it's important for us if we see a recurring theme, like we might have missed something and the general public has the voters have a problem with something that the committee has put forth in this plan, then I absolutely think it should be addressed. And I'm not afraid to have conversations with people that I don't agree with things on. And I want to see that stuff. I want to see residents' comments, especially if I don't agree with them. But like, to your point, like leave Wrentham alone, it's fine the way it is. I just think that's slightly embarrassing and not professional enough to be included in a comment section in a master plan report. That's my humble opinion.
I totally agree with Chris. This is Rebecca. I totally agree. There's a lot of comments that I read through there earlier that I just don't think should be included in this about specific roads or specific things that, you know, maybe some of the general ones we should go down through, but I agree with you, Chris, 100%.
Like, I'll give you this one, Josh. Traffic is a mess. The taxes are too high. The town is ruined.
Oh, my God.
I've lived in Wrentham for 64 years. You know, I don't know. I don't know that. I don't know that person's comments should. So anyway, you get the point. My 8-year-old can rant and rave like that as well. But is that going to lead to any constructive dialogue at this point? So again, I think I have to rebut my initial comment, and I think we have to take a harder look at this. I don't necessarily want to go through 95 comments right now. But I don't think that it's the right move just to put every single comment after looking at these in this thing.
Okay.
And believe me, I'm a big proponent of free speech. I want people to be able to speak their mind, but I just don't know that it's, and I'm interested in hearing other people's opinions too. I just don't know that it, yeah, I don't know. I'll digress at that point.
I think I would follow up that, you know, Chris, your point about how, and Josh, your point initially too, around how the comments throughout this 18-month process have been integrated. And I wouldn't want to give any particular comment more or less weight. And it does, you know, I agree with Chris to redact my initial statement to say, yeah, giving kind of a premise for a lot of this stuff. I think it also, I don't know if it would also potentially take away from the actual process and the actual document that has had a lot of work.
Well, maybe it sounds like returning to So I can see both sides of it. That it's good to have the transparency and reflecting, back that these are the comments that we received, and we haven't edited them in any way. But I think maybe the proper home for that is just an appendix where we can put that there. It's not showing up in every section. It's not been given the prominence of other comments that we received throughout the process. And we could even add to that appendix some of the other, the survey results or, other things if we'd like to make it a little more comprehensive in terms of the comments received throughout the process. But if that's something that the town would like to see, I think that's reasonable, just to give people a reflection of what individuals have said and then how those individual opinions have been coalesced into this document.
John, are we going to put all the comments from all the past sections in this appendix as well? I called you John. I meant Josh. I apologize. Having one of those days. Is the goal or the will of the committee to include, like, are we going to include all past comments in survey results, or are we just kind of going to include these comments in survey results? And then my follow-up question would be, does that make sense? We should follow similar protocol that we've taken throughout this whole process. And again, the will of the committee, I'm just one person, but I just don't know that we want to all of a sudden at the end change protocol and just do this. Again, I could be wrong. I'm just bringing that up.
Yeah, I think that to be clear, the procedure that we've followed so far has actually been to use the website as the, repository of all procedural process related documents and comments and, survey results, et cetera. So what would perhaps be most consistent with what we've done so far is to put the full list of comments received that I sent out to the committee whenever that was, a couple of days before this meeting, to put that onto the website as well. And then in this document, refer to the website as the place where, if anyone's interested in the process, the detailed meetings, the notes, the results of individual sessions, they can refer to that resource and find the comments received in the final comment period there as well.
I think that's good. I think that's sort of resolves the issues that we are just bringing up. That may be the best way in doing it.
I like the consistency of it.
Yep. Did you just take your hair down?
It was pulling at my head.
All right, so I think that I like that where we've landed on that. That seems like
Yeah.
a very consistent approach to treating all of the feedback we
Yeah.
received throughout this process. But maybe I'll just try to get through a few of these slides a little quicker, just so you can get a sense of the types of comments, and we can pause as needed. But these were comments specifically on the executive summary section. We had a few comments as well on the introductory section. I think some of them, would be reasonable clarifications if people have questions like, will projects brought before the town planning board be evaluated the lens of this master plan once finalized? Like that's one of the intentions here, is that this document's used to guide future decisions by boards and committees, and that they use this as a sort of a lighthouse of sorts to guide processes. And then the thing currently happening on Route 1 does not seem to fit with regional use that's good for the community. I think it's a little specific, and the master plan does have things to say about Route 1. I don't know that this comment is, seen in terms of how it relates to all of those references to Route 1 in the document. In the vision, comments such as, can the town attract more businesses in categories other than clothing retail that doesn't end up with unsightly strip malls? I think that's a very specific opinion. Again, we do talk about business attraction in general ways in the document. Question line that says stop sprawl development, as it looks so much better than dense housing development. That was a comment actually that struck me as reflecting some of the conversation we've had as a committee. So you know, perhaps that's something that we could look at specifically. I think maybe the term sprawl development might not be the right term. That is kind of what this should be the focus and feature there. On economic development, lots of concerns about traffic, and I think those are reasonable ones. Perhaps traffic could be highlighted in the economic development section a little bit more. Very specific questions about the gravel parking lot, which I think will probably be outdated questions by the time the master plan is fully completed anyhow. Adding sidewalks and very specific roads and locations. I think in general, one of the responses to the comments is that we might want to back off a little bit in terms of very specific roadway or street improvements, because we can't catch them all. And if we highlight some, then people feel like if they're not highlighted, then they have been deprioritized. And that's not the intention, really. So the intention is to make a more general statement about, for example, improving sidewalk connectivity and the network of sidewalks in the town where people want them. And then you all can decide in further processes whether Madison Street should be prioritized as an economic development goal. So that's just a general comment on that relates to that.
I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. And I think that regionally, like, for example, I think we all can agree that a big issue for a lot of the townspeople and voters and feedback from these surveys has been, like, certain areas like downtown. People want continued revitalization of downtown, more shops, more restaurants. So if you focus on areas that vast majorities of people have shown results and that they want to have, development or what have you, I think that's a much better approach than saying we need more sidewalks on Madison Street or something like that.
Great.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
I agree.
And then a comment about, this was only one comment about COVID-19, but maybe reasonable, but it seems, I think within the time frame of where we're at, maybe it will still be too soon to judge the long-term impact of COVID-19 in any number of ways. So I think we still need to keep it in as a critical moment in our shared history together, and how the data collected, I think, is a reasonable question as well, but we just don't have, I don't know that there's much data actually in our master plan, given when the data collection occurred, that was over the COVID period. I think it was just before the COVID period. Land use, some specific questions about, specific areas, Sheldonville or West Wrentham. How will this goal of preserved landscapes be achieved if the zoning is changed? I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. You can change zoning while still having open space and land conservation as a feature of that zoning. Lots of people focused on downtown and the Crosby Valve land and those vacancies, which we've heard through many processes. In this process, of course, I think it is reflected in the document. Again, focus on traffic flow so we can make sure traffic is highlighted as it is in the transportation section, but can also be highlighted in the land use section. And then specifically giving preference to local employees and teachers, police, firefighters, et cetera, or any cottage cluster developments. That's very specific, but not unreasonable. Jerry, within the limits of the law. Jerry, yes.
So I'm either getting a little confused, or maybe I just am getting a little confused. Based on the comments we've gotten so far, the discussion about how we're going to use these comments, are we making any changes to any goals or strategies?
Not unless we decide to this evening. I think maybe I could have been more clear about that, but the changes which I'm making of my own accord are those that are clarifying sort of typographic errors in some way, or amplifying things that are already in the plan in some way. So I'm not, based upon the comments that I have before me, and I'm using the bullet points that we're going through now to let you see the content of the comments and sort of the variety of them. But unless you all say as a group right now, like based upon that comment, we should reconsider the way we approach that item. That I'm not going up the higher level of content in the document. So not changing the vision statement, not changing the goals. Some of the specifics that we just talked about, like street names, for example, show up mostly in the strategies, which I do think is a little more fair game in terms of adjusting the strategies so that they're reflecting, reducing the confusion that may have showed up in some of the comments. Does that help, Jerry? Does that help make sense?
It does. Well, first on the first part about editorial stuff that needs to be clarified, those kind of things. You said at the beginning, understood that. I don't, as we've gone through this, I don't think we've come across any comments yet that changes any strategies or even street names. If we listed some street names, I can't recall any particularly off the top of my head, and any to that level of sensitivity in the goals and the strategies. If we're going to make changes to those, I think, speaking just for myself anyway, I'd like to know what strategy or goal we're going to change, even if it's just the wording within that strategy.
Let me see if I can find a specific example.
And I don't know that you need to do that right now. Maybe we just need to go through this, continue to go through this while you're doing that. And at the end of the day, if when you go back to do your follow-up action, if there are strategies or goals that you think we should make changes to, because it says Madison Street instead of the West End or whatever, if we could, I would think there'd be a relatively short list of stuff that you could send to us and we could say concur or non-concur.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good process. So yeah, as I, based upon what we talked about this evening, I'll go make some changes. Most of the changes will be in the editorial sort of clarification realm. If any of them, in my opinion, venture beyond that, I will put that in a list and send it back to the committee so you all can see that.
Yeah, so if one of the goals, all of a sudden we add to a goal or a strategy that says teachers, police, fire, and other town employees should give them preference. We don't have that yet. We kind of need to know that that's a recommendation that we want to address.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good process.
Can I just make one clarifying comment for myself? So again, it sounds like we're going through all of these comments right now, and similar to our previous processes when we were developing the goals and strategies, etc. We're looking at this last final comment process to see if there's anything glaring that we're like, oh, we need to include this and update in something that we've missed in the last 18 months. Does that sound accurate?
Correct. Yep.
Right. So that's to kind of go back what Chris mentioned a little earlier. That is why these comments are a little bit different than all the others, because all the others we received in the different forums and different part of the process, we did adjudicate, and we as a committee decided how we incorporated that into a goal or a strategy. We have not done that with these particular comments. That may be why it's worth if we don't do anything with them. The two extremes is that we don't list them at all, any of them, or we list all of them.
But I guess my comment to that would be, throughout the previous processes, we've integrated comments that were vested in the actual process. And these last comments are kind of saying, oh, and now I'm looking at the process and I'm like, I don't like these things, even if we've already addressed them in the process and integrated them as a committee.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I think so too.
I don't want to speak for Krista, but I think you're saying something slightly different, because I think Krista's saying people have had an opportunity throughout the last 18 months to comment section by section. And then we did take those comments, Jerry, and then we used those to get to the point that we're at right now. So it's not like if we don't do anything with these comments, it's not like we're ignoring the will of the people. And I don't want to speak for you, Krista, but I think that's what you were trying to say, but I could be very wrong.
No,
Right.
I think we're all saying the same thing, Chris.
Okay.
Yeah,
'Cause
I think,
I thought Jerry was saying like, no, we need to take these comments and then go adjust some of our goals based on, you know, these last minute comments.
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting, but if we did, we need to work through that.
Got it. Okay,
So
now I understand.
If 8 months ago you made a comment about something about sidewalks or veterans or whatever it might be, and then we met as a committee and we decided not to put that in there, and if I'm Joe Citizen and I'm following along and I still don't see it in there, that I know that it didn't get in, or if I see it in there, either way, I know that it got addressed. We're at the point now where we have all these comments. Unless there's something, as I just mentioned at the very beginning of this particular spiel, was that unless there are changes we're going to make to the goals or strategies, then we're not doing anything else with these comments and questions.
Except putting them with all the others, to Josh's point, like on the
In the
website.
repository, I guess, yeah.
Okay, now I understand.
Okay, I'll keep flipping through these. We're almost through, I think, about at least halfway. In open space and recreation, this is actually a good example of something that wasn't in the plan previously that may be reasonable for the committee to consider. And that was adding references to harmful algae blooms in the water bodies of the town, and very specific references and language for where that could occur. And I don't think they're mentioned at all in previous, not to say that I don't know if they were mentioned specifically in previous discussions. Water quality certainly has been a recurring theme in our discussions. So I don't know how the committee feels about that specific comment.
So then I'll kind of come back to what I just kind of opened up with before. If Josh, if you, I'm going to ask you to do the work for us. If based on that, you think we should change the wording to strategy 5 under open space recreation to add algae blooms, and then send that to us, and we just kind of vote from remotely saying, yes, I concur to do that, or no, I don't concur to do with that. And then we just add up the votes and we go from there, unless we meet again. But that would be a good example of how I think we could approach this.
Is that too specific though?
Well, that's why I say this is
Like
the first thing you've mentioned.
What if there's a, you know, like, I don't know, it just seems like that's very, very, very specific, and we're trying to be more big picture. We could talk about like quality of our lakes, or, you know, water quality of our important resources.
Yeah, so that's why I think if Josh does this first and takes a cut at it and says, yeah, this is included. We've already got this covered, even though we don't say specifically algae blooms, if we're talking about water quality, we don't need to do anything with it. But if he thinks we need to add the words algae blooms to goal 4 under strategy 3, then he would send that to us and we would remotely vote on it.
Yep, got it.
In this case, I don't know if the committee would like to, but the commenter has joined us this evening, Andrew Gordon, and has his hand up if we'd like to recognize him. Just to maybe briefly say a couple words about it, Andrew, if you wouldn't mind keeping it brief.
Nothing political at all or anything that would keep it like extremely brief. The harmful algae blooms that happened were they weren't like at the legal limit or twice the legal limit. It was 700 times the legal limit, and it happened like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and it feeds directly into our water supply. So that's why it's taken a personal interest in it, and also why I took the time to spend like a day and a half reading through the master plan and places. These weren't just like random places that I thought it could be integrated. I used references from our green infrastructure master plan and all the other master plans that the Wrentham town had talked about algae and how they should fix it, and just cross-reference those master plans into here so that everything was lined up. So that's why it wasn't in previous ones, but that's also, it wasn't like new things. It was all from other master plans and integrating those in. Thank you for letting me speak, and thank you for all your hard work on the master plan.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, so yeah, so I can do as Jerry suggests, kind of do the work, and when I think these maybe do warrant adapting a strategy, I think it would be most likely to be strategy level, not necessarily goal level, because we've done a lot of hard work together as a committee on the goals and the strategies. But the strategies I feel like are where some of the details could show up more logically, and then I can put, document that as I go through that process and send it back to the committee, and then you all would have the final say on that.
And Josh, if I could just address Andrew's comment. I thank him for signing on. I thank him for doing all that research. And again, this is why I still stick to my original comment that whether it be algae blooms or some other thing that we haven't thought of, if our vocabulary and what we say is broad enough to cover aspects relating to water quality, water, I feel like there might be something else that could affect our water as well, and there is. So I just want to make sure that we're taking a broad stroke in encompassing not only algae blooms, but other harmful things that we might not even have thought of or know about at this moment in time, and incorporate it into the next 10 years of the master plan.
I'm good with that and references and how it gets worked in. It was specific to algae blooms because that was the thing, and that's where it was tied in. It's in the other ones, but however it goes in with water quality and affecting that and the toxins that are affected to it. I agree with everything you've said about that. So thank you for even entertaining this. I know it's at a late thing. I was trying to give context around. That's why some of this was introduced late, because it's a recent development, but luckily it happened like right around the time of these changes. So it's, as it was talking about climate change, it wasn't just green infrastructure and lowering carbon emissions that we should do, but it was also recognizing the impacts of climate change, how that affects our water, our health, the resources like the lakes that we enjoy. So thank you.
And Becca.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank Andrew for doing all the research and looking at other master plan documents. I do think that it should tie in under climate change, and obviously he's more of a resident expert in that area. So I just wanted to thank him for doing that kind of research, and it is something that we should consider down the road for the 10 years. And I agree with Chris that there could be more impacts of other things. So I think we should use language around other things that could be part of that water quality, but maybe use algae blooms as an example of one thing, like we have done in other examples when it came to specific strategies. We use just like certain examples, but we could leave it wide open to other things that do affect how climate change affects the future water quality of the town.
That's good idea and a good approach that we've used in the document. You're right. All right, so keeping us moving a little bit. So housing, some of the other thoughts and comments that showed up were sort of the contradiction between wanting better traffic management while still growing housing, and how those might not be headed in the same direction. Questions about being able to change course from development patterns of the past. I think those are all reasonable questions, but not necessarily impacting the overall, as we've been talking here, the overall goals and strategies of what has been developed. One opinion that a building moratorium is needed, not other strategies. So I don't necessarily agree with that, and I don't think the master plan does either. And increasing housing density seems to directly conflict with some of the other goals, which is a reasonable perspective. I think that's not, again, not necessarily mutually exclusive, and those sort of balances can be found. Transportation, a little bit of perspective on. Thanks for joining us this evening, Andrew. A little bit of perspective on the transportation. Some people have viewed some of the language, I think, as more towards negative towards car ownership, which I think has shown up in our committee discussion occasionally too. So I think that's something that's worthwhile to look at, because it's not, I don't think, the intention of what we heard. We're trying to expand infrastructure so it's safe and convenient for all users to get around, including bikes and pedestrians and scooters or whatever else, including cars. But we don't want people to think that the master plan is anti-car in some way. So I'll look through the language and make sure that see if I can see where that impression is coming from and make some corrections. Transportation, again, that we're sort of dealing with roads that were built in the 50s and 60s, and they can't stand up to the traffic of the 2020s. I think the master plan is looking at ways to do that and does have some goals and recommendations around it. Keeping sidewalks clear in the winter, I think that's reasonable. That's the type of suggestion that might deserve another as an example. So we talk in a lot of ways about how to improve walkability through various strategies. I don't think we did mention winter walkability, which I think is a reasonable thing to mention specifically. And again, some specific street discussion around Taunton Street and why it was not included specifically. So I think that is another comment that maybe helped with removing some of the other specific references to streets in some of these cases. Community facilities and services. A few comments around waste management. I think waste management actually was a topic that wasn't mentioned as much in the master plan, and based upon these comments, I think there's this is another area, for example, that could be thought about. So I'll put some thought into how waste management, where it could be included and how it could productively be included, and then put that in the list to the master plan. But I think this is another one where it's a reasonable addition that doesn't show up as much in the content of the plan today.
I think that could be because of the new law about mattresses and stuff too.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're almost there, guys. And then historical and cultural resources. I think these were actually, the comments kind of reflect the importance of the goals and strategies that have been crafted. So I don't think there's much to act on here, but they do, to me, reflect that this is an important topic to people in the town. Energy and sustainability. This is where some more specific questions about climate change came up, and that some disagreeing with climate change is factual, which I think the master plan does have reasonable facts included about how climate change is impacting the town, and we should. I can include some additional of those facts if they're not clear enough, but I do think it's reasonable for the master plan to mention climate change and its specific relationship to Wrentham. Again, some comments about waste management here as well, and that the approach to green energy needs to have care taken to it, which has actually been a topic of much discussion, I think, with the committee about what the potential impacts are, or if certain green energy technologies are ready for the town's full support. And I think that we've tried to make that balance right in the language as we put it together. And then some additional comments about working with the building department. That's, I think, very individual experience maybe that has been had. And the question about the property downtown and its environmental assessment specifically, which is a little too fine-grained for the master plan. There were some overall comments. I think these are the type which I would not sort of act on because they, in many cases, would go against a lot of thoughtful discernment that has been done by the master plan committee in response to the committee's discussions. So, for example, reordering the topics. You all went through your own process to order the topics in the way that they are ordered. So I don't think that we should reorder the topics based on individual comments. Renaming topic chapters, I also don't think that that's necessarily what we should be doing at this point. Reordering specific goals and strategies, you all have gone through your own prioritization process for that. So I also think that we shouldn't be doing that. There was a comment about avoiding the creation of new committees or subcommittees. I think that's also a kind of individual preference, and that even if that is a recommendation or seems to be a recommendation, that would be subject to, again, to further discussion by the town. The master plan is not mandating any creation of a committee or anything like that. So this would all be subject to further discussion and refinement. Perspective that the goals seem, goals for energy specifically seem a little bit slow, and that a more aggressive timeline might be warranted. But again, I think that's up for the town to perhaps decide if they want to move more quickly in the future. All right, so I think we have a game plan for how to approach these comments now. Thank you for kind of talking through it with me in the process. It provides me with clarity so that I don't do work on making revisions and then have to backtrack a lot because I did something that the committee wouldn't want me to do. So what I will do is continue in the manner that I am. I have not made any changes, substantive changes to content. I've only, again, made those editorial type changes. As I finish the changes that are related to these comments, I will keep a very detailed list of any more substantive goal or strategy changes that then I will pass along back to you all for, maybe we'll do it with a brief survey of some kind, depending on the length of the comments, just so that you can all say like, yes, that looks good, or no, that doesn't. Any other thoughts about comments and their integration?
No.
Were these comments anonymous, or were they, I see some people's names next to them, or IP addresses, which is freaky, if those are IP addresses. Are we tracking people's IP addresses?
We are.
Are we the FBI? What the hell are we doing that for?
IP addresses show up in the survey. So those respondents that responded by survey, there's IP addresses. You know, so that's a good point. Right now we have shared them with identifying information. We should probably keep that amongst ourselves in the committee. Comments, if we do decide to put comments, I mean, so I guess we have decided actually to put comments up on the website with the others. We will strip out the identifying information before we do that,
Yeah.
so that we don't list it for public consumption. But that's, yes, so those are, yes.
I'm just slightly embarrassed that John Murphy's IP address is associated with some of these really mean comments, John.
I know.
Josh,
If I can ask you a question about the second to last bullet about the 2050 energy goals, sounds lazy. I don't remember discussing the 2050 goals of energy. Did I miss the meeting on that, or was that a typo? We meant to say 2030. 2050 sounds a long way off.
I'd have to go back and look at the specific language. I think it is actually in reference to the town's energy planning. So I don't think we did specifically get into the details of that in this process, but I think what we're doing is referring, the town has been doing energy planning as a separate process that Rachel and others in the town have been involved in. And, okay, you know, Chris and the select board have been as well. So that planning that may be where the date comes from. But yes, so I can check on that. But no, I don't think we got that detailed into setting dates for specific energy goals in this process.
Okay, because I know the Governor Baker just signed the act that everything has to be energy efficient, meaning buildings, and the new National Electrical Code's coming out in January addressing these issues also. So it's going to be a lot faster than what's on this.
All right, so maybe that's thank you for flagging that, John. Maybe that's a reasonable comment, or we could just remove the 2050 reference because it is likely to be subject to change, I think,
Okay.
as those technologies go. Becca, did you have your hand up? Is that a fresh hand or is that an old hand? All right, just want to check. Okay, so now let's move on and spend a little bit of time just talking about the implementation chapter. So we have put this together. I sent it to the committee as well. If you do get a chance to look at it and have some thoughts, please let me know. But what we've tried to do is give some reasonable guidance about how to take the overall goals and strategies and move forward with them, using certain goals and strategies as an example for action items that would flow from them. It is not designed in such a way that we went through every single goal and strategy and gave actions for every single goal and strategy. We found that to be very laborious in past planning projects and actually not that helpful because it just inundates everyone with too much information. So I think what we've tried to do is instead set a framework for how to approach implementation. A key feature of that framework is the establishment of a master plan implementation committee, and that this chapter has detailed language about what kind of examples have worked successfully in other towns and in the past to establish like what the makeup of that committee is, how it gets established, how it operates, and on which boards and committees it references and refers to. So I would appreciate if you all have some time to look at this. One other thing that this chapter includes is in the feedback survey that we went through the comments just now, it also included a section on the implementation approaches. And also we talked about this in the final forum as well and got feedback from the committee, from the community at large. And so this has a variety of various sort of metrics in terms of how you would approach implementation, ranging from timing, which you see on the screen now. And the summary of all these results is that the most sort of preferred approach on any of these metrics is a middle road. So, which makes a lot of sense just to get a feel for the people that responded and compiling these all together. So not short-term, not a preference for short-term activities, not a preference for long-term activities, but that mid-range, which may include either end of that spectrum, but averages out in the middle. Minor or major investments, again, falling somewhere in the middle, that maybe you'd have some implementation actions, of course, that call for major investments, others that call for minor investments, or maybe a preference for that middle way. Whether the town works with what you have presently or expands support and capacity in terms of number of staff or other ways to think about support and capacity. Again, staying in that middle ground, so not too much of a preference leaning toward one or the other. Funding resources, so whether you focus on town resources or external funding, even this one, which you might think there'd be a strong preference toward external funding because people are often sensitive about how tax dollars are spent, of course. But even this one fell almost toward that middle average, or the average of 3.43, with external funding being more towards the 5. And then thinking about the magnitude of change of how the master plan should be looking. Are you looking for minor changes? Are you looking for major transformations with each of these implementation activities? And again, falling in that middle ground between those two poles. So a very moderate approach, which is welcomed, I think, in the context of a lot of our civic discussions these days. There's not as much moderate opinion. So if you have a moment, please do take a look at more of the details of that, and I'd be happy to respond to the committee's additional comments or feedback to make that strengthen that chapter as it gets finalized as well. I know that was a breeze through, but any thoughts or questions about the implementation chapter?
So
I think that, Josh, I think that, we just need to be very communicative with everyone and reinforcing the point that we've made, in our committee, but that you made tonight, that this is a plan, right? By no means are we insinuating on zoning changes. This plan doesn't do that. What we're doing as a group is trying to take feedback from our constituents, and some, best practices with this current situation that we're in, and trying to make our town a better place for the next, 10, 20, 30 years. But I just think the communication should be like, this isn't the Bible, we're not looking to take drastic measures and form millions of committees and cost the taxpayers a lot of money. We're trying to take a common sense approach to big ticket items that the majority of the townspeople agree on, on things that are going to benefit our town. I think that's the approach we've all taken thus far. I think that's the way we've been communicating this plan for the last 18 months. I would just hate for the implementation, of that not to be communicated the same way.
I guess my,
You're on mute, Josh.
All right, go ahead, Krista. Thanks, Chris.
I guess my question would be like around, again, this implementation component. I'm curious about the, I know you had mentioned kind of best practices in other towns and things like that, but like who would that be comprised of, and how do we make sure that people who want to be a part of the committee actually know that it exists? And, I think that, I've really enjoyed being a part of this process. And at the same time, I don't know how many, I feel like there's kind of a small group of folks, a fairly small group of folks that even know that these committees exist until they get an email like, hey, this committee has put together this thing. So I don't know if that's a part of the process to how do we, I don't know if the word's market, to make sure that there's enough of a town-based representative of welcoming people onto the committee to say, this is part of the process. We need you to be a part of this. Just so that it doesn't become, so segmented.
Great. That's good feedback. I think that we do have some very specific information in the chapter about the makeup of the committee, but I think having some language about suggestions around maybe advertising for the committee or how to promote, the call for committee members, I think is a good insight. So we can include that too.
John.
Jerry.
John
Oh, John. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think, the implementation, I think is crucial because, it's something that master plan, we should look at it every year. We should be looking at it. Okay, what happened from the master plan this past year? Where are we going forward? It also should be updated every year. So there should be a group of people that have this in their, sites every year, or else it's just going to be a waste of time that we just put in. So I think the implementation is just as important as what we've gone through in the last 18 months.
Agreed. And we do outline that this committee would actually report to the planning board and the select board, or the board of selectmen, to give updates on an annual or biannual basis, and then also to give updates at town meeting at least once a year as well. So this, I think, is a, as you say, a good way to both move forward, but also track progress and sort of have sort of a visible accounting of what's happening with or not happening, either way.
And that should be communicated.
Mhm. Jerry, yes, you've had your hand up.
Thank you. The document that you sent us that has implementation as a header on it,
Yes.
and then shows some of these graphs, which remind me of risk tolerance graphs. You have in there the goals and the strategies and then actions. And for each one of them, there's about 3 or 4 actions. I think if I heard you right, those were not all encompassing actions. Those were just examples or starters.
Correct. What we did was take as the goals were prioritized previously from our efforts with the committee, we took the top goal from each topic and then added under that goal example actions of how the goals and the strategies translate into a more tangible action. And so that's what we've used to model that, but we did not do that effort for all, 6 plus goals for each topic. We did one for
That
each topic.
was so that needs to be fleshed out.
To state that more clearly, is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is the actions should, in some way or manner, address every one of the strategies for a particular goal. There should be action items. One action item may encompass 3 or 4 strategies, but all those strategies should be traceable to an action item. Do you agree with that? I mean, that's not work you've done yet. That's work that would need to be done by someone.
That's correct. I think that yes, as the implement. So in this case, assuming that a master plan implementation committee is sort of seated and formed, that if they went through these top priority goals and exhausted the actions or decided that they didn't want to move on those and want to move on other goals, then they would have to do a similar process of translation from a strategy into a very tangible action. Or in some cases, I think the strategies are almost actions in already. But there would have to be a process of discerning what that next step is or what the first step is for each of those items.
Yeah, so I think that needs to be spelled out a little bit.
Okay.
I think that the leadership of the town is going to be involved with this, both from the committee standpoint of an implementation, but from the key boards need to understand that.
Okay.
And where I'm going to with that is those action items then need to be converted, I believe, from other, those action items need to be converted into a scorecard. That scorecard needs to be broken down to the 3 phases that are near term, midterm, and long term, and the progress made against those. If we can't score those things, if this committee can't score those things, can't score the progress quantitatively, we're not going to get any traction on this. So I don't know if that's something that you would do necessarily, but I think that needs to be, if it's that's something that you would do as part of this effort, the town needs to know that that's real key to making this happen. And it kind of brings us back to the last master plan we did 19 years ago, whatever it was. We never did that. There was no implementation plan. There was no scorecard. There was no way of tracking progress. And the only thing that was done that specifically met anything that was in the master plan was by individuals, particularly paying attention to what was in the master plan and really just kind of doing it on their own initiative. That's a big missing part from what we had done previously that needs to be added to this effort. And I'm not necessarily putting this on your plate. I'm kind of, I was on the master plan committee 19 years ago. That's why I know when we started this master plan effort, in fact, 18 months ago, it took us quite a bit of an effort just to go back and look at all the things that were in that previous master plan and make a list of what things had actually been done. That was the first thing that had been done. So the master plan's out there. It's this document that's been in existence from 2002, whenever it was finalized, we started in 2021 here. No one had ever done that. Never had ever gone back and said, okay, we got this done, we got this done, we didn't get this done. So that those tools to monitor the implementation are as important as any committee that's going to exist.
That's a great point. Yeah, I can spell that out. I think that deserves as you
Yeah, so
just
at
stated.
the very least, if it just said, here's the things that the town needs to do in order to make implementation happen. It's not just the committee, but it's a scorecard. It's fleshing out the scorecard. It's keeping track of things based on, 3 phases or whatever it might be, and having some, and the final means is having some kind of stick and carrot.
Great, thank you, Jerry. But Becca, do you have a comment? No, okay. Fine. Any other thoughts?
This is Beatrice.
Yeah.
Jerry, you make a very, very good point. I mean, if we're putting all of this together and worked on this for the last 18 months, and if we can have a tool that tracks progress, it's, for me, it's just, we're not going anywhere. And as you pointed, 20 years ago, that happened, and just the energy just to figure out what got done and what didn't. So I'm just wondering, Josh, is there a software? I mean, how are we, there's so many softwares out there in corporations that do tracking for projects. I don't know if the town owns any of these softwares, or we can see if we can get something like that. I don't know. So my thoughts.
Yeah, that's a reasonable question. I don't think that there's not a software best practice that jumps to mind. I think maybe I could do some checking and see. There's the Mass Municipal Association, MMA, that sometimes has a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of how municipalities are tracking some of these more complex processes. So, but I could check on that and see. But I don't know of one offhand. But you're right. It seems like there should be. If there's not, we should all hire a software developer and get in there.
Right, exactly. I mean, I wouldn't mind volunteering and saying, okay, I'll keep track of what's going on, but definitely. That's my last final comment for the evening.
Thank you. Chris, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we definitely have to make sure that we're tracking this. I think that, when this gets presented to the Board of Selectmen, the final version, we presented the final version, but are we going to talk about next steps? Do we have another meeting with you, Josh? And Rachel?
Yeah, I don't think we have it on the calendar yet, but I think what we're doing is anticipating perhaps getting on a joint select board, planning board session for January, and date sort of to be determined. I think one of your January meetings. But yes, that would be a final presentation of the fully finished document that includes the types of changes that we've been talking about in this session. And then we could talk about more specifically the master plan implementation committee and what some of those next steps might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good opportunity for us to bring that point up about, this is a balance, right? And we got to be very careful. We need an implementation committee. I agree with the points that Jerry and Beatrice and everyone else has said. We need some kind of a scorecard. But when you know this better than I do, Josh, but when you're dealing with planning, it's all about the intent. So not only do we have to have an implementation team, we have to make sure that the implementation team understands the intent of our goals, because if you get someone who's on an implementation team and they're too far left or they're too far right, they're not going to get the real intent of the strategy and the goal, and it could lead us down a horrible path. So we have to figure out, how we get the intent across as well. Because you could have someone read this master plan and say, I think what they're trying to say is that we need to completely abandon, I know this isn't what we're saying, but just hear me out. We need to completely abandon clean energy. And that's not what the intent of this master plan is saying at all, nor is it saying that we should focus all of our eggs in the clean energy basket. We're not saying either of those two things. So how do we make sure that the intent of what we have, and we've talked to our constituents, we've talked to the community, we've come up with all this together. How do we make sure not only do we have a scorecard, but we have kind of an intent card to make sure that the intent is actually being what we thought it was going to be and wanted it to be? Does that make sense? Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Yeah, I think that what I would kind of refer to that as continuity between the master planning process and the master plan implementation process. And oftentimes that continuity is found in continuous members that were a part of this process. So you all, if any of you would so desire to be a part of that next phase effort with the committee, that would be very advantageous so that that continuity can occur. The other aspects of that continuity are having some representatives from the planning board and the board of selectmen, and making sure that that sort of all of that can move together and have some not a full new cast that picks up this implementation effort, but having that ability to have the context of the conversations that we've all been going through, and to bring that to the implementation portion. All right. So we have talked about quite a bit. Let's just touch on those next steps briefly. We touched on them just a minute in that response with Chris, but so I will be working on completing the remaining revisions that are a little easier now that we've had this conversation to know how exactly to head with some of them. I've started that. I've got a sort of new document with all these changes underway. I will complete that probably in the month of December. I don't think that will be completed before November is done. But then as we wrap this up, get a list back to, I'll add to this list of next steps that you don't see on the screen, but a part of those next steps would be to return that completed document to the committee again, so you all can see it with a bulleted list of changes to any strategy or goal content that have occurred. I will not, I guess, unless you all ask me right now, my plan would not be, for example, to give you a like track changes version with every T that I've made from a small case T to an uppercase T. I think that's just going to be a lot of work, and I have not been doing that so far, so I'd have to go backwards a little bit. But so I will focus on the content changes to goals and strategies specifically for that bulleted list, just so that you can all focus on that. Then we would have a presentation to the hopefully a joint meeting between the planning board and the board of selectmen, and that would be a meeting where we'd speak with those boards beforehand, but the intention there would be for a meeting to adopt the final plan. And then of course, thinking about the next step that we've just been talking a lot about, which would be the formation of a master plan implementation committee. Thoughts or questions about those next steps?
No.
All right. So I think it's clear to me where we need to wrap this up, but I do feel like we're very close. And again, I just wanted to offer a hearty thank you for all of the meetings and effort that you've all put in, both in these sessions, in the public meetings that you've attended, and the extra time you've given outside of meetings to take a look at things. Really appreciate it. And I know that Rachel would echo the same, and your really strong commitment to the town and looking forward over the next 10 years. So excellent work from you all. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, it really has.
Josh, I think you deserve a thank you as well. You know, you and your team,
Yes.
Rachel, her team, you guys have done a lot more work than we have. You know, and I mean that with utmost respect to everyone on this call. But when this call ends, they do hours and hours and hours of stuff that we don't see. So I just want to say, you know, thank you. And Rachel, I know she wasn't able to make it tonight, but thank you to her. Thank you for, you know, to your team and everyone at MAPC, and, you know, the people that helped you put this together for us, with us.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you
Josh.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you all very much. And so with that, I guess we will not have a final meeting, so we'll consider this our formal goodbye. But hope to see you all perhaps at that joint planning board, select board. It'd be great to see you there and have your support. If you can join us once that date gets established, we'll make sure that you all know about that. And we'll probably communicate a little bit by email over the next month or so with those final revisions. So appreciate it all. Thank you very much. And have a great night. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.
Bye.